You announced a Bitcoin Treasury. Michael Saylor famously says that Bitcoin is on a need-to-know basis. So why was DDC on a need-to-know basis?
This is the best way of a company to build long-term shareholder value. And having my background to look into, okay, Bitcoin versus other crypto assets. I mean, there are a lot of other DATs out there doing different types of treasury plays that, we believe Bitcoin is the asset to hold for the long term.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the show. Joining me this week in New York is Norma Chu. She is the founder and CEO of DDC, and it is another Bitcoin treasury company. I'm so excited to chat with you, Norma. So nice to meet you in person. Thanks for joining me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me here. I'm so glad to be here.
You have a fascinating backstory, and we have something in common, a passion. We'll get to that. But first, let's just start from the beginning. You're born in Hong Kong, but raised in Seattle, right? Tell me a little bit about your origin story.
Yeah, so grew up in a middle class family in Hong Kong, and during the 90s, a lot of families migrated overseas before the Hong Kong handover, and so we migrated to the U.S. back in 1994. Yeah, so I was in 8th grade, and then I was in Seattle because my grandmother actually has been living in the States for many, many decades. And so I grew up in Seattle for about 12 years. And then in my mid-20s, I moved back to Hong Kong.
What did you do in Hong Kong when you moved back?
So, I always have two passions in life, which is like the stock market and cooking. And so when I was in high school, I started like really getting into CNBC right after school. And so I've always had a thing for like finance. And so after college, I was really into investment banking. I'm like, that was my goal. I'm like, I gotta go into investment banking. That is the place to be. And so I was in KeyBank Capital Markets for 2 years. And then when I moved back to Hong Kong, I switched over from investment banking to equity research.
Did I hear correctly that you went to Harvard with Simon Garovich from Metaplanet?
Okay, so we didn't go to Harvard together. He is much, much smarter. He studied applied mathematics at Harvard. I actually went to University of Washington, UW.
Okay.
But then I went to Harvard Executive Program in 2023. Yeah, so a lot more recent.
Okay, so you had this passion for financial markets, you were watching CNBC, but also you loved cooking.
Yes.
And now those two worlds don't really collide, yet they did. You managed to create a company, right? Run a food company.
Yeah.
So tell us about DDC.
Yeah. So, after doing equity research for about, 8 years, I just had this calling. I'm like, I want to create something that can encourage younger generation. Like back then I was also younger, but younger generation to enjoy cooking. Because like that transition from growing in the US and coming back to Hong Kong, I realized a lot of my friends, they didn't like to cook, or they think cooking was like really like old school, I don't want to go into the kitchen. But I want to change that perception, because like cooking is a part of a lifestyle, right? Especially spending so much time here in the US. So yeah, that was like my thing. I really wanted to do it. And so I was in, equity research. And over the weekend, I would just like go grocery shopping, write recipes, and then create my content. And then I started sharing it on Facebook and Instagram, more on Facebook back in 2012. And so I, kind of gathered my first 100,000 follower on Facebook. That's when, our first advertising partner, which is like a local sauce brand in Hong Kong, reached out to me and say, oh, I really enjoy your content. It's very different. No one really focusing on Asian home cooking. Is there a way to collaborate? And back then I was, doing really well in the bank. I loved, stock market. But I was thinking like, what? I want to give it a try. Like, this is something new. And I don't like to do things, like half-heartedly. So I'm like, what? I'm going to go all in. And so I kind of quit banking and say I'm just gonna go all in DDC, DayDayCook, and see where it goes. And now 13 years later, here I am.
Coin Stories is proudly brought to you by Gemini. Investing in Bitcoin has never been easier with Gemini's Bitcoin credit card. Earn up to 4% back in Bitcoin on everyday purchases like gas, dining, groceries, and more, with no annual fee, no foreign transaction fees, and no exchange fees on your rewards. And this summer, get 10% back in Bitcoin at golf courses. Plus, sign up today and get a $200 Bitcoin bonus when you spend $3,000 in your first 90 days. Apply now at Gemini.com/Natalie. If you're like me and want to stay on top of Bitcoin without getting lost in all the noise, you've got to check out the weekly CIO memo from Bitwise Asset Management. Bitwise has been around since 2017 and manages more than $10 billion across 30 plus strategies. CIO Matt Hogan puts together a quick 5-minute memo that breaks down the biggest stories in digital assets each week. Just go to bitwiseinvestments.com/CIO memo and check it out. And always, of course, carefully consider the extreme risks associated with crypto. Coin Stories is also brought to you by Bitdeer, a global leader in disruptive technology for Bitcoin mining and high-performance computing for AI. Bitdeer trades under the stock ticker BTDR and boasts more than 2.5 gigawatts of electrical capacity across 4 continents, positioning Bitdeer as one of the most diversified and power-dense computing companies in the world. Learn more at bitdeer.com. So you were basically a cooking influencer.
Yeah, oh my gosh. The people always say like, oh, you're the first generation. I'm like, how? Sounds very old. No, but like, yeah, I think I was. Like, I started with creating content. In the beginning, I didn't show up in the video because I just want people to focus on like the techniques and like the steps. But then we were getting a lot of requests, like advertisers were asking like, so who's behind DayDayCook content? Like, we want to collaborate with a person, right? And so my team at the time, which was like 3-4 people, they're like, Norma, I think you should consider like showing up in the video and telling people, what you're making. And so I started, appearing in the shows, and then I had a couple TV shows as well, like cooking TV shows and travel shows. So that was like the start of DDC.
So this is one of the reasons I was so excited to talk to you, because this is the passion we have in common. I love to cook. And a lot of people, except my friends, they might not know this, but outside of Bitcoin content, probably the most like the content that I consume is cooking content.
Yeah.
Like, I love watching videos of people in the kitchen. Maybe sometimes they crack open a bottle of wine and then they make some recipe, but they make it look so easy and it's always accessible. And I just love it. And it gives me creative ideas. And I grew up watching my mom cook, and I loved the experience of being with her in the kitchen. And so I just love cooking. But it's funny because you can't really combine that with Bitcoin. And I have this belief that that's how you get more women in Bitcoin is you combine Bitcoin with sort of these, lifestyle videos that a lot of us are watching, whether that's cooking or travel or experience-driven, wanderlust kind of things. But I haven't found a way to combine the two. Do you have any ideas?
I think we should really think about that one and launch something similar to that. I think, for cooking, for me, it's like very therapeutic.
Yeah.
Because we're so stressed with work every day. But when you go to the kitchen, you kind of think about cooking and you're just focusing in the zone in that moment. And you're not thinking about anything else. And I really enjoy cooking for someone you care about and just seeing them enjoy the food. I totally agree. I think there is a way we should combine Bitcoin and cooking together.
Yes, there has to be a way. I don't know if you could just like show a recipe but be talking about Bitcoin in the background or what.
There's just like little prompts about like Bitcoin, facts as we're cooking, and it could work.
It's so incredible how popular some of these pages have gotten. I mean, millions and millions of views, and they collaborate with each other, and then they have partnerships with like these cooking products. I mean, it's a huge, massive business. Can you speak to that?
I think content creation just went to like a whole new level in the past 10 years, right? In the very beginning, we were still, getting all these cameras and really into the equipments. But then over time, it's just like everybody is a content creator. And it's just become, I think, a natural part of promotion and marketing and how you connect with your audience. And the audience could be your community members or your customer or just someone you share like a common passion with, right? And so, and the interesting thing is I actually see a lot of similarities between what we've done in mainland China, building that following of millions of people watching our content and sharing that passion for food here in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin itself is also a very community-driven space where people are sharing ideas and they go deep into like, really understanding Bitcoin itself. And there's so much passion in it. Like every single person that share and connect on X or on other platform, you can feel it. Like that's like their heart and soul. And I think there's a lot of really interesting similarities in terms of how we create this community that can promote, Bitcoin and promote cooking and promote, it as a common passion and mission in a way. And so, yeah, I think, I seriously, I think we're going to circle back to this idea over and over again. It's like a Bitcoin cooking show.
There has to be a way because Bitcoiners are also, they're passionate about food. They want to get fiat food out of our system. How did you stumble upon Bitcoin? What's that story?
So, back in the day, like I've always heard about different stories of Bitcoin, but never really focused on it except in 2021. So more recent years. It was during COVID. And then, back that year, China also prohibited, Bitcoin investment. That's why in 2021, it was unique being in Hong Kong, where a lot of Bitcoin talent and Bitcoin capital came from mainland China to Hong Kong. And so a lot of my friends were really getting into this space. And, I have a lot of friends in finance still. And so in the same year, I think a lot of Bitcoin became more mainstream as well. Like Tesla bought like $1.5 billion of Bitcoin, and the other credit card platforms started integrating like crypto services or start talking about it. That's when I personally started investing in it, but in, very small scale. But, I never really thought about, applying it into a listed company. So fast forward a few years, I listed listed DDC on the New York Stock Exchange at the end of 2023. And then I still remember last year, summertime in Shanghai, one of my very early investor. I mean, he's been supporting DDC and me for like 10 years. And he himself has been in Bitcoin since 2014. So he's very deep into the space. Every time we catch up, I'm really excited. I'm like, you know what? I'm working on this like M&A ideas. We're looking into acquiring this brand. And he's like, Norma, great, wonderful. And I've seen you work so hard in building this company for the past 10 years. And he's like, what if you leverage what you have at DDC, right? But not just acquiring traditional assets. What about buying digital assets, in particular Bitcoin? And so, for me, it was like, a very new idea. He definitely pushed me, to think outside of the box. But I'm really grateful to have this background in finance and also my personal experience in Bitcoin. Otherwise, I think if any other CEOs, like when an investor just give you this idea that, oh, you should buy Bitcoin with your company, I think it would just like go over their head. But I was like, okay, interesting. Tell me more. And so he's like, well, take a look at MSTR. And so I was I go back to my equity research days. I start looking into it. I'm like, well, they're definitely doing something right? Look at the stock chart. And that was September. But then I was really busy and I came to the States for another trip. And then after November, I looked at it again. It went from $40 billion to $70 billion in a very short period of time. So I'm like, all right, maybe I should put some things down and really go deep into understanding the playbook. So, I'm always really grateful to have a very good, growing network of supporter around me, including mentors and investors, and in particular to this investor, right? He's become such a good friend now, but without him really giving me this idea, I don't think, I would have, quote unquote, stumbled upon it.
Wow. So he was really orange pilled. He really was a believer.
Yeah, for sure.
Can you tell me a little bit about the process of going public? Is that something you always wanted to do? And maybe touch on something I've learned more about through Bitcoin, which is that public companies, they need to beat a certain hurdle, right? You're always expected to grow. And a lot of the ways that people do that today conventionally is mergers and acquisitions, right? Sometimes stock buybacks. Bitcoin is this novel thing that Strategy and Michael Saylor have pioneered, showing, hey, this is actually maybe a better way and it outperforms everything. But can you talk about sort of what it takes to go public, maybe why you wanted to do it, and that pressure that suddenly you feel in order to grow?
I think the pressure to grow is there since maybe taking on investor money. Because before going public, I think we were already, have institutional money, VC investors and stuff. So definitely feel that pressure ever since you have outside investor. And I think, I've learned over the past 10 plus years journey is it's important to select the right type of investor that share the same vision. Otherwise, because they don't understand, it's hard for an investor, and you don't have to blame them, to fully understand building a business from ground up. You have to solve issues, and then you kind of be nimble and problem solve along the way. And sometimes it works out great, sometimes it doesn't. Then you have to pivot again, right? And I think it's hard for an entrepreneur, if you select the wrong investor, it would really give you that negative pressure, because I see pressure as like both positive and negative.
Sure.
I think positive pressure is great. It drives us to become better and challenges ourselves. But when we have negative pressure, then when things go wrong. And so I'm very fortunate. We had never really had, those type of investor where just like they don't care about anything. Doesn't matter if there's macro environment. They just look at, how come you're not meeting your numbers? So lucky in that sense. And then in 2023, I mean, I've always, people always ask me like, oh, have you at the day that you started DDC, have you planned out everything? I'm like, I wish I did. But no, you kind of at any moment in time as a founder and CEO, I think you just kind of have an open mind and you look at opportunity that makes sense for you and your company at that particular moment. And then you feel like, hey, I'm the best person to execute and to take that forward, and you take it on, right? And so that's why it's like when we, if you look at the evolution before the listing, we started as a content creator, right? A community. And then we started doing content commerce, selling products. And then before the pandemic, we were like, okay, we don't want to sell the people's product anymore. Now we're going to sell our own products. So it's always these decisions that you think strategically make sense that can take your company to the next level. And then so in 2021, I think it was, I've been building DDC for 10 years. I think it was time to kind of think of a way to raise funds in a different league where, that's how I feel, listing or IPO in your company. It's like just bringing it to the next level and really opening up yourself and your company to a whole new arena of investors and audience. And that in itself, I mean, for us, it took 2 years time, and it's a very long process. It's a long process because we've gone through different challenges, right? Macro environment, and being a Chinese listed company in the US, we also met with a lot of like uncertainties in terms of changes in regulation. But what I learned during that process, I think, is just having a really solid team around you, because I can absolutely say this, is not a one person job. Like taking another company public, it's like, oh yeah, I did that. No, it's like every single person that is in the company and every single person that is working with this company as a partner, maybe your lawyers, your auditor, and your investment bankers, to continue to stick with it. Because it's a process that could really challenge your mental toughness, because you can't anticipate all the obstacles that you see. But my role is to kind of like say, no, we're gonna get through this. We're gonna keep going. But you also at the same time need your team to support you in the same way, right? And to put it in at like 100% every single day in, day out, for such a long period of time. And so I find when we were ringing the bell in November 17, 2023, I just remember like, it was just really a grateful moment to have, people flying in and people just like really long-term DDC investors, including the one that told me this idea. He was actually in the balcony with me ringing the bell. And then also we have new partners, investment bankers, and also new investors that came into the IPO. So, it was just an amazing process. But once again, I look at it as the start of a new chapter, which is like, hopefully it's a new chapter for the following decades to come, right? But it's something that I wanted to accomplish, to bring the company to the next level. And now we're here still learning a bunch of new things every single day. But once again, I think it's just having that mindset of being open-minded and always learning.
This episode is brought to you by Casa, the leader in Bitcoin self-custody solutions, helping people like me secure their wealth with simple, powerful multi-key vaults. And now Casa is here to help businesses and even governments do the same. Introducing Casa Business, a secure, easy-to-use 3-key vault designed for small and large businesses with team signing capabilities and a web dashboard. Start your Bitcoin treasury the secure way and protect your assets. Get 10% off your Casa plan at casa.io/Natalie. Next up, Bitkey, a Bitcoin hardware wallet with multi-sig security, inheritance, and a recovery system designed for real life. No complex setup, no seed phrase, just true self-custody without the stress. Named one of Time's best inventions in 2024. Use code STORIES for 20% off at bitkey.world. Up next, the Bitcoin way. There's only one way to protect your Bitcoin from government, politicians, and third-party risk, and that is 100% self-custody. My friends at the Bitcoin way will train you how to do this the right way the first time. No compromises. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Natalie to speak with the experts about making sure your Bitcoin is secure and private. Want to win 1 million sats just by answering Bitcoin trivia? The top 50 players win free sats weekly. One lucky winner gets 1 million sats each month. With Speed Wallet, you can send Bitcoin, swap to stablecoins, shop gift cards, play games, explore mini apps. So don't miss Speed Trivia. Head to speed.app/coinstories and use code coinstories10 for 5,000 free sats. Well, in recent months, you announced a Bitcoin Treasury, so you're entering that growing arena. So tell me about that, because Michael Saylor famously says that Bitcoin is on a need-to-know basis. So why was DDC on a need-to-know basis?
Oh my gosh, I think it was timing, and it was just doing the right thing at the right time and having that right opportunity. I think everything lined up perfectly. And when I look back in just a few minutes time, I mean, so much has happened already. At that moment, I realized like this is the best way of a company to build long-term shareholder value, right? And having my background to look into, okay, Bitcoin versus other crypto assets. I mean, there are a lot of other DATs out there doing different types of treasury plays that, you know, we believe Bitcoin is the asset to hold for the long term. And for me to present that to the board, and we're thinking about ways to integrate it with food also, integrating it with the underlying food business. There's actually a lot of interesting things that we can think about. I thought it was the perfect opportunity to create real long-term value for our shareholder. If you look at the macro environment, it couldn't be a better place and time to do this now, because a lot of people ask me, why now? Why not like last year or 2 years ago? A few years ago, we can't do it. I think it'll be a much more difficult environment to do it, right? Especially we haven't listed yet. Even being listed, I think the overall regulatory environment was not as supportive and as friendly, and the regulatory framework is not as clear as it is now. And so with that, I think is overall, I would describe it as a structural change that happened around Bitcoin in the past 18 months that made it possible for me to even think about it. And so after having considered it, and because we are a small microcap company, it was, I would say, relatively easier for me to bring it to the board and win their support and then launch it. Because I think if we have a much more scalable business, I think it'll be harder to convince the board that, you know, this is not a major pivot, right? So it was like the size of the company, the time, and the environment that made it perfect opportunity. So once again, it was my job really to look out for the best opportunity for our shareholder. And it's my job to convince the board that this is the best for us and we should take this forward. So I'm glad that, you know, we got the support and here we are.
So what is the plan? Do you have like a vision for how many Bitcoin you want to own? Do you want to eventually go into the preferred market like Strategy has been doing and issuing those types of instruments? What's the plan?
I think I want to keep the plan right now in the near term very simple and focused, which is just, you know, stacking. And recently I shared my target of, you know, 10,000 Bitcoin by the end of the year, which is a very aggressive target. But at the same time, I feel like we have the right support and, you know, structure and framework in place to make that achievable. You know, for example, in the past, you know, couple months, ever since we met in the Vegas conference, we launched our first Bitcoin focused fundraise. And, you know, we raised, you know, $528 million from Anson and a group of investors that are, you know, very Bitcoin and Web3 focused. So I think that in itself is a great start for us to, you know, start stacking. And then second thing we did is last week or 2 weeks, last week, we filed another $500 million shelf F3 that would enable us to have even quicker access to the capital depending on market condition. So I think, you know, our plan is always like, have the most flexibility for DDC in the near term to do capital raises that is accretive to investors so we can continue to stack in a very disciplined manner. So, you know, in terms of are we going to go into the preferred market, I think that is still too early for us right now, given the size of the company. And there is still a lot of I would say more plain vanilla, straightforward financial tools that we haven't really maximized or, you know, capitalized with. So maybe not yet. I think we'll still have a lot of, you know, available facilities in place that we can tap into to hopefully reach that 10,000 Bitcoin goal.
Yeah, it's funny. We have the same goal at Semler Scientific. So same 10,000 is what we're trying to reach. So a lot of people have the perception that China is very anti-Bitcoin. So being a Chinese company, have you faced any headwinds?
No, I think, it was just like, I think in terms of being listed in the US, right?
Mhm.
And having our business in mainland China and Hong Kong, it's actually a great place to be. If you look at Hong Kong recently in May, they actually passed the stablecoins bill. It's globally the first bill to come out that has really clear framework in terms of stablecoins and also how the Hong Kong government view cryptocurrency in general. I think it opened up a lot of support and education and understanding for the mass consumer and also TradFi investor to understand what stablecoin is. And that, on surface, it might not be so directly related to Bitcoin. But for us, now that we have a Bitcoin Treasury strategy on top of the food business, it's actually fantastic. I'll give you an example. A month ago, I was speaking to a very TradFi investor for our previous round of financing. But, he's very busy with a lot of Hong Kong IPOs he was doing, and he just didn't want to understand what we were doing because he didn't want to spend time of learning, okay, what we're doing, what do you mean by accumulating Bitcoin on your listed company? But as what we always do, we always keep investors informed and updated. So I had another call with him probably like a week ago, and the attitude completely changed. It was like a 180-degree change. Like, oh, Norma, like I've been looking into what the Hong Kong government is doing with stable coins, and it's really interesting. And now I take a look at what you're doing. I think Bitcoin offers even more upside. And as an investor, I want in.
Oh, that's great.
And so I think, even though mainland China prohibits direct investment into Bitcoin, since 2021, the Hong Kong government actually promotes Web3 and crypto. They want to be like this, I would say, crypto center for Asia Pacific region. And so, for us, we benefit from having, being the business founded in Hong Kong, and then we have a great following in the Chinese-speaking community, but also listed in the U.S., which is like the deepest capital markets in the world. I think it allows us to not only have this narrative and distribute it to a lot of U.S. investors, but also have a really growing and very, I would say, interesting investor base also in the Asian market.
That's fascinating. I would love to get your take just on the flood of new Bitcoin Treasury companies. It seems like one is announced every other day. Do you think that it's a competition or a race? Do you think it's all just great for the space? Do you worry that it could form a bubble? Like some people are very nervous that it could be like a .com situation. What do you think about all of it?
I think is good for the space in general. Like if I have to, just a one-liner, I think it's great. Like more companies coming in, adopting Bitcoin as a treasury strategy, maybe a very aggressive strategy or like conservative strategy is great. Just I think every listed or private company in the future will own Bitcoin on their balance sheet. So it's like almost inevitable. And we feel like there's one every day because we are so deep in the space and we're monitoring every day. But I think when we talk to other TradFi investor or just a friend, they won't even know what it is. So I still think because we're in the zone, we think that, there's so many of them, but we're still such a tiny, tiny little niche market. So I wish that we will have more companies coming in, right? We can be, there are more multi-billion-dollar companies built on Bitcoin accumulation strategy. So, I would say community, like the investor community, retail investor will take Bitcoin strategy even more seriously going forward. I think we are still at a very, very early stage. Whether do we see as a competition or do I worry as a bubble? Like, I think it's really interesting in every space, like even in content. It's the same. Like we were one of the earlier lifestyle content creator in mainland China, right? And a lot of people started doing content. And then when people were like, okay, this market is flooded with content creator. But it's a natural evolution of a space. And I think it's healthy, right? It's healthy in the sense there are more people coming in and it's just basically survival of the fittest, right? Whether you're ready to grow this for the long term or if you try it and you can't, then you stop. And so, I think it's natural. And of course, it's important for us to come together and always be I would say like comrades almost to each other and share best practices so we can avoid a massive bubble like scenario, right? Because nobody wants that.
No.
And so I think overall in general, the more people that come into the space, the better. And I mean, right now, if you look at all the communities are discussing, and even like Tim Kotzman, what he's doing with all the Bitcoin Treasury, conferences, it's exactly doing that, right? Create a stage where we all come together and then we can all learn from each other. And even though it feels like we're one-upping each other, but it's good, it's like in a good way, it's like, okay, this is what we want to create transparency for everybody. So now here's a dashboard. Now it's a cooler dashboard. Now we have a cooler dashboard. Hey, that's good for everybody, right?
Yeah.
And so I think overall, I'm a very positive person. So I think it's all great for the space.
Yeah, I mean, every company buying Bitcoin benefits everyone who holds Bitcoin,
Exactly.
right? And I like the way that you put it. It's sort of a camaraderie, but at the same time, survival of the fittest, because you have to have proper risk management. You have to know how to run a company.
Yeah.
And there will be some that are obviously more successful than others, but it's just an exciting trend to see happening and emerging. It's obviously like one of the biggest narratives in the space right now is these Bitcoin treasuries. Any other things that you're following just in terms of just the developments we've seen, more institutional adoption, more regulatory clarity? Like what's top of mind for you?
Top of mind for me, I think because I've been so focused on just execution. Right now, I think is still focusing on our strategy and how we continue to add differentiation versus other treasury companies out there. And when we think about how we create or amplify our differentiating factor, one is the, originating from Chinese market, we have access to Chinese investor. I think that's one angle. But then we also think about, how we acquire Bitcoin. There's innovative ways where we can work with massive Bitcoin holders and Bitcoin investors to also create value for each other. So we're not just, fundraising and buying a spot. There's another way for us to differentiate ourselves. So top of mind for me is like, okay, how do we focus now that we have, good access to funding, continue to stack, but stack in a way where we can bring in some innovation while we're doing it.
I saw on Twitter, someone was talking about you, and it was a headline that you are the first woman CEO of a Bitcoin treasury company. And I thought it was kind of funny because it's like,
yes, I know.
that in and of itself shouldn't be that big of a headline. But what do you think about the fact that it is a mission kind of to get more women involved, and there is a disproportionate sort of difference. There's a lot more men right now than women in Bitcoin. And do you feel like you're kind of paving the way for other women?
So I totally agree. Like I don't highlight that as like, oh, that's a great angle. But I think that's just a matter of fact, right? It's like that's what it is. And it's the same with being an entrepreneur, right? I mean, female entrepreneurs is so rare in the past 10 years. It's much better now, right? But still, the percentage of funding, right? VC funding that goes to funding female founders is like a very tiny percentage versus otherwise. So even for me, I see the similarities of why people would point it out, just because when I was going to all these startup events or speaking on panels, I'm mostly usually just the only woman, right? Yeah. And, listing the company is the same. But for me, once again, the core is like, I'm doing this because I think it's the best strategy for the company. And it so happened that, yes, I'm a woman. That I might be still the only female guest in like a panel or an event, but that should not be the focus. That should not be the focal point. But if me doing this also inspire other female investors, may they be crypto native or non-crypto native to get into Bitcoin, great, wonderful, is a fantastic thing to have. But I think just, once again, I share the same view as you. It's just funny. It's just funny that it gets
very well said. Yeah, it doesn't have to be a headline. It's just exciting to see, and you're inspiring other women, and it's really great how the space is evolving, and it really is for everyone. What do you think is most needed to get more of like the mainstream adoption that a lot of people are looking for? Because we're at over 100,000, and still, when you walk into an average place, people are like, Bitcoin, it's too much. I'm too late. It's this or that. They have some myth that they've latched onto and they're against it. What do you think will change that?
I think it's through us sharing what we're doing and just be like very authentic in sharing our journey and what we think, like why is good, why you should invest, right? What I think is good. It's just through education. And I think the best way to educate is just to share your own experience, right? And some people might think that, oh, yeah, that's a great sharing. Some people are like, you're just lucky. It could happen, but it's just consistently, it's almost like turning into a recorder. That every single person I meet now at a new events, they always ask me, so what do you do? I'm like, I'm in food and Bitcoin. That's like the best opening.
It's a best opener. Yeah. Icebreaker.
It's like, oh. And so I remember I'll share this with you, like this summer when I was in Lisbon. I arrived and I didn't really know anybody, but I went to like a YPO event and the local chapter event. And so I met other female entrepreneurs as well. And once again, food and Bitcoin. And so I share with them like my journey and what I think. And, you know, a few of them actually messaged me afterwards. They're like, Norma, I loved your story. Like, can you point me to some books or like podcasts? And I send them your podcast, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
It's like any podcast that I can learn more about Bitcoin, so I can be more educated in my Bitcoin investment. I'm like, wow, that's exactly what I want to do and what we are doing right now, which is like just telling our stories so more people can have access to this information and seeing success stories, right? And so once again, feeds back to the more company that does this and does it well, it's going to be a very positive factor for driving mass adoption.
I'm curious about something. Since you have so much experience within like the food industry at large, a lot of Bitcoiners are passionate about fixing not just the money, but also things like our food system and making it more healthy. Have you seen sort of the ways that the broken financial system has impacted our health and the food that we consume? And do you think that Bitcoin can address some of those issues?
That area, I have not think about it.
No?
I think it's interesting. No, but when we think about, like for now, I think that's a great angle though. For now, like what we think about a potential integration for Bitcoin and food is still on the consumer level.
Okay.
Yeah, it's still like, okay, maybe we can, launch, I think I shared this with you a little bit before, like Bitcoin reward system where we can encourage our consumer that's only not just buying a product and consuming the product itself, that we can have better engagement with them. But to actually improve the entire ecosystem, no, I haven't thought about it yet.
It's something I've wondered about just because, well, here in the US, have you seen those charts where people point out how few companies, like these big monopolies, own literally everything in the grocery store? It's like it funnels up to basically 6 companies. And every smaller brand is owned by a bigger one that's owned by some behemoth. And at the end of the day, then you look at the ingredients, and if you compare the ingredients either now to in the past in America or here in America to other countries, it's like ours are filled with chemicals and dyes and preservatives that are illegal or weren't used in the past. And I think it's broken down some of our health because that's what we consume is sort of what we are, right? And so I almost wonder if the incentive system, like if we could fix the money through Bitcoin, improve capital as a base layer, that the companies will maybe have better quality products because they're not going to be in such like a rush competing with the melting ice cubes of fiat, right? And it's going to be a system that's rooted in something that's valuable as opposed to something that's just printed out of thin air. I don't know. I mean, it's not going to be fixed overnight, but I hope that Bitcoin can actually fix food as well.
In that, if you put it that way, then I think there is a chance of improving the chances of smaller brands winning and smaller brands
and competing actually. Yeah.
Yes. So that goes back to the reward system. Like if you look at the smaller brands that, the brands that we own in the US are all like organic, clean label brands, right? Yes. And they typically have higher costs, lower margin, and it's very hard for them to fight for shelf space.
Yes.
And so if you look at the line item, one of the biggest line item for small brands are marketing expenses. And that's why the Bitcoin reward system, it could basically empower these smaller brands to have access or direct ability to kind of promote their products and incentivize consumer to come back without going through like spending, another 10% on the margin, because that's really what kills them. And so that's one way, when I presented to the board, my board is 3 independent board of directors. 2 of them are consumer veterans, no Bitcoin or crypto background. The third one is crypto native. And when I presented it, I'm like, you know what, besides just, stacking a lot of Bitcoin, I think the integration down the road could be this reward system, which they loved. Because they see all these small brands that are running right now in the US, even in other markets, are very challenged because of high cost structure. Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense because there are brands that have become popular here, but as soon as they become popular, they get a buyout from one of these massive companies. Yeah. Like I think Pepsi recently bought Siete, and already the ingredients changed, and I'm just like,
Siete was already pretty big too. Imagine the ones that doesn't even get to Siete's scale.
Yeah, I know. I've heard it's so difficult to compete for shelf space.
Yeah.
Have you ever thought about going on Shark Tank when you were first starting out the business? Because I always see any food companies on Shark Tank?
No, but like, because I wasn't very familiar with the show. I think I would be so nervous.
I love that show. It's so good. I've always loved it. I wish they had like Bitcoin. A Bitcoin
Maybe
component
we can do
to
the
it.
show and then we can pitch the show to Shark Tank.
Any final thoughts? Anything else you want to cover or share with the audience?
No, I'm just so glad that I get to have this conversation with you. So I will share one last story. Okay. So at the Vegas Bitcoin conference, right? There was a closed door session with Michael Saylor. And then I was fortunate enough to ask him a question about, hey, I'm launching this Bitcoin Treasury strategy. It was right before we announced the purchase of our first 100 Bitcoin. I'm like, Michael, I would love for you to give me advice. One of the advice he gave me, which there's only two, is that you should be on Natalie Brunell's podcast.
Wow.
Okay, so
that's very kind.
Let's dedicate this episode to Michael Saylor. Thank you for that idea, and we've done it. Now we're here.
I'm eternally grateful. Thank you so much. I mean, Michael Saylor is such a visionary. I think we're so lucky to have him in Bitcoin.
Absolutely. Without him, I wouldn't be sitting here today.
I think a lot of people feel that way. He's really, really changed the game. Well, thank you so much for joining me in person. I'm really excited to have you in the space and also in the Bitcoin Treasury ecosystem. So thank you so much. And for information, where should people go?
Follow me on X, DDC Norma.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Norma.
Thank you, Natalie.
Thank you so much for checking out this episode of Coin Stories. Make sure you're subscribed to the show so you don't miss any new episodes. And if you can, turn on those notifications and leave us a positive review. They really help the show grow organically with new listeners. We have a free weekly newsletter. You can sign up at thenewsblock.substack.com. This show is for educational and entertainment purposes only. Nothing should constitute as official investment advice, and you should always do your own research. I'm always open to feedback and guest suggestions, so please feel free to reach out at info@talkingbitcoin.com. I'll see you next time.